He utilizes fMRI, EEG, and non-invasive brain stimulation techniques such as TMS and TES to study neural mechanisms at the intersection of attention, perception, and memory, which we will be diving into today. So how
who's here for TMS? TES? Okay, cool.
TBD?
Cool. Yeah,
TBD.
great. You'll have a side.
So how can we improve cognitive functioning through these non-invasive techniques of cognitive stimulation? So let's maybe, oh, my bad, not yet. Let's ask Ted a quick question. So have you been on stage with comedians before?
I have not.
Oh, good.
I have not, and I'm
You're already
nervous.
being judged by your hair and your t-shirt and your button down.
But I got to say, I like the opening question that you had. That was
Yeah.
really cool, especially because I contributed to that stat.
You did? Wow.
I lived in San Francisco for 8 years
How
with
many
my
dogs?
dog, one dog,
Okay.
and then no kids, 0 kids. And then 3 months after my dog died, my wife had a kid, and we moved out.
Oh,
East Bay.
wow. Oh.
Yeah.
I think you're forced to move out if your dog dies in San Francisco.
Yeah, that's kind of how it goes.
You have a baby, you
As soon as
can't
you have a
walk
kid, just like, oh, see you later.
So are you mad that TED Talk stole your name?
It's okay because it gives me more swagger. It feels like every time I talk, it's a TED Talk.
There it is.
And so now, whenever I say something, because I feel it's so important, hopefully other people feel that too now.
That's a good answer. And another question before we start is, do you believe that understanding the kind of neural mechanisms of how we have consciousness inside of ourselves could be the greatest discovery of the 21st century?
Absolutely. I think that would be amazing. It's going to be very tricky and hard. A lot of people have been working on this problem for a very long time. I don't necessarily see an end in sight. Perhaps once the computers rise up and become cognizant, they'll tell us how our brains work.
When's that going to happen? Is that going to happen anytime soon?
I'm not sure. The computer told me not to tell you.
Okay.
So you're in on it. You're part of it. Okay.
Already an uplifting discussion.
And I'm definitely gonna poke and prod a little bit at like the longitudinal effects of cognitive stimulation, because it seems as though that if you came and zapped me a few times and it was like, great, this person's performing better, but it's like, what else did you affect by doing that? Could it actually be good in across all cases, or could there be something bad that could?
Isn't the scientific term tasing, not zapping?
Yeah.
Give a couple tasings, they'll do anything. It's amazing what it does to the
It's
brain.
right on our consent form when you show up. Yeah.
It's good to know. You just tase your patient.
Yep.
So are these zaps the same ones that are claimed to cure depression?
Actually, yes. The TMS that we use and that many other people use, transcranial magnetic stimulation, for those who aren't familiar with the acronym.
And what is that? Just I know we'll get into that.
We'll get into that.
All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
All right.
But
I brought up a big.
but you're right.
comic
Yeah,
concern,
yeah. It's you're right. That
Comics
is
are really
the technique
looking
that
for that.
people use for.
Could you zap us right
depression.
now so we feel better about going on
You
this
know,
show?
Like,
I have
so-
not figured out how to harness magnetic energy with my hands yet. But if I had the
You're a
tool,
walking
like,
TED
if I had-
Talk. You have all the information.
I heard you just go Kamehameha.
Hadouken!
You definitely have kids. That's clear.
All right, let's jump directly into our questions. So
Yep.
don't be shy. Raise your hand. Take a guess at the scientist question to earn the fun theme-related prize. All right, do you want to read off the questions, Ted?
Sure. At what age does neuroplasticity end?
Comedians, do you have any thoughts first?
Well, first, can we determine whether it
Saucy.
began in me? I have no idea how much plastic I have in my brain.
I think you have a lot of plastic in your brain.
I do. Probably.
Yeah.
I swim a lot. There's like bottles floating. There's plastic in
Right.
the ocean. I probably imbibe
Yeah.
some of
I'm
that.
always drinking water bottles.
Yeah.
Ooh, shit. Well, way to start with a softball question, Ted. I'm good. Oh, gosh.
We have a bunch of smarty pantses in our audience.
My own personal guess about my own neuroplasticity is that, let's say 35. That's an age where a lot of people's lives end.
Yeah.
So let's go for
Especially like 1,000 years ago, that's when a lot of people's lives ended.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very true.
Yeah.
It could be.
Should we go?
Yeah,
to the,
let's do some answers
All right,
here.
all right. Hold on. I think we heard something good from up here.
Never.
Whoa.
Wow.
Wow.
Is-
I'm gonna say Eureka.
Eureka!
Always
Close
get
enough.
Excellent. All right, sir. Why don't you come on down?
Come on up.
Da 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 da. And you, sir, to help with your neuroplasticity. Oh, and to get another maybe beer at the bar. If
When
that's
does
what-
balance go away? When does?
When does balance? It went
Yeah,
away
that's-
approximately 10 seconds ago.
Okay. Okay.
That's when it went away. Here, sir, is 399 games, puzzles, and trivia. And here's one right here.
We have.
Test your neuroplasticity right now.
Everyone gets a trophy right here. Everyone gets a part of this book.
All right, let's see what you got. Maybe tell us how you came up with the answer while Kevin finds it.
Well, so far, I see my brain still seems fairly plastic, and it doesn't seem like it's going to change.
Okay.
Good answer.
I thought that was positive affirmation. So for this puzzle book, one of the tests is a U.S. citizenship test. All right, so we want to ask you, what are the first 3 words of the Constitution? Out you go!
Out you go!
Oh. Anyway, now come on back with your plastic brain. Anybody know the first 3 words? There we go. Here you go, sir. You're a citizen again. You come back, sit.
Come back. Take a seat.
Come sit, please.
You don't have to
We're
leave
That's
the
your book.
premises.
Yeah.
We're joking.
Yeah, it's yours. Yeah, you won
Oh, yeah,
that.
it's a prize.
You could test yourself out on your citizenship or anything else.
That's so great.
We actually made him feel like he had to leave.
I
feel
felt
so
bad. I felt like I was
He was so thrilled to
working
get
at
that
Homeland
book.
Security
he
or
does
something.
need another drink, so he was
He
probably
should. If you need to get another drink,
ulterior
do
motive.
that.
So maybe we chime a little bit on. There's some game over. So this takes a while. So we used to think that neuroplasticity ended in early childhood development, and then the brain was static. And then we've recently learned that it's not. So what is neuroplasticity, and why does it go on forever?
Yeah, so neuroplasticity, it basically goes on for your entire lifespan. It basically means that your brain is able to adapt and change to its environment. And it can be for better or for worse. And previously, as you said, people thought that neuroplasticity basically ended after the initial stages of development, and that your brain sort of peaks when you get to adulthood, and that everything is sort of downhill from there.
That's true.
Yeah.
In general, I don't know about the
Yeah,
brain.
when did they disprove that? I want to hear about it because it's not been my experience.
But
Yeah.
Ted, that is
I think-
that is true for cognition, though, right? So cognition
So-
does peak at 23.
And that's actually true for a lot of things. So you're
I peaked.
I peaked at 20.
Yeah, talk to my
a lot of
girlfriend
people
when I
peak in their
peaked.
20s. So yes, cognition, many cognitive functions peak in their 20s, and brain matter itself peaks in its 20s. On average, your brain weight, it peaks in its 20s, and then once you hit your 30s, about every year, you lose about 0.2% brain weight every
God, I
year.
need that 0.2.
And then it accelerates so that by the time you're about 60, you lose about 0.5% of brain weight every year.
Does it just go out your ear? Where exactly does it leak?
Yeah,
No?
pee, poo, spit, I don't know.
Where does it
I
go?
don't know. Where does
Where's
it
it
go?
going? You don't even research that?
That's
I
a
got
great
probably like a little
question.
bit of gray matter
track it
right down here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have some in the ocean.
Oh, jeez.
Is there any way to halt that? Is there any way to halt the regression of the brain to stop that?
That's yes, and that is the point of this entire talk is
Oh.
to how can you stimulate your brain to sort of bring it back? I'm bringing you all the gloom and doom up front
Thank you.
just to make it a little more interesting,
Right.
so that when I say fortunately the brain retains its neuroplasticity across the lifespan, it actually means a little bit more.
You're not
That's
gonna,
not what this slide says.
No, so
Jesus.
if you go to the next slide, it's a little more encouraging.
Oh, look
right?
at that.
So we
Look
have
at
this,
her having an
That's better.
idea.
So we have this foxy.
I hope I look that
silver
good.
Fox.
She's foxy.
But
She
she,
is
very
she
both of us are
she
very
understands
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Also an entrepreneur, obviously.
Yeah. She understands that the brain remains plastic across the lifespan. I mean, why else would there be a light bulb?
Yeah, or maybe
Actually, it was also a. The reason why I put that bulb in there was not just to emphasize the fact that she understands how to keep her brain sharp across the lifespan, but it was a very thin premise for me to tell my one joke.
Okay, here it comes.
Which is a light
sweet.
bulb joke.
How many?
How many therapists does it take to change a light bulb? Give up. Just one. That's right, someone said it. But the light bulb has to want to change.
There you go.
Yeah, I know. It's a terrible joke. I know.
Can you get a
Okay,
prize
fine,
for that?
but-
I like that. Can
Yeah.
you get a
Yeah.
prize for that?
It's a stupid joke. I told it for
That's
2
good.
reasons.
You can
One-
have one of these lights after the show.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I told it for 2 reasons. One, by contrast, all your guys' jokes will be much funnier, and 2,
Very lofty goals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
seriously. Keep the bar
that's
real
sort
low.
of that's the takeaway message here, is that if you want your brain to become healthy and to stay healthy across your lifespan, you have to want to change. You have to use your brain. You have to exercise. You have to stimulate your brain. And that really is the bottom line. So if you fall asleep for the rest of the talk, that's the gist of it. You need to change. You need to want to change.
So she's
So-
she's having an idea here. She's not thinking, oh my gosh, what is a light bulb? I'm so old, I
yeah.
don't recall.
But just there's many different ways to stimulate your brain. Pondering deep thinking, thinking critically, having conversations with people, that's stimulating your brain.
Yep.
Just interacting with your environment is a very important way of stimulating your brain.
Yep.
If you think about it this way, if you your brain is very much a product of its environment, and if you don't use it, you lose it. And there are 2 main life events when you get older that happen that really aren't related to your health, but they still cause a lot of cognitive decline. And one of which is retirement. So you stop really, thinking critically at your job, interacting with people, navigating your environment to get to work. These are all things that exercise your brain in small ways.
Okay, so no pension. Bad.
Yeah,
Pension bad.
But people stay active in retirement, and those are usually the ones that fare best through retirement, are the ones that stay active and engaged and keep thinking and doing stuff. The other thing is the loss of their spouse, unfortunately. Actually has aside from the depression and the sadness that goes with it, you're losing a person that you would normally interact with. Yeah. That causes you to engage critical thinking. Now, if someone says, can I stimulate my brain by just reading a book? Yeah, you can. It's good for you to exercise your brain and think about what's written in a book. But at the same time, it's better to join a book club because that makes you think about the content that you've read and listen to other people's points of view on these topics.
I have a quick question. What if I've joined a book club and everyone in my book club is fucking stupid?
Is that why you don't come to the book club meetings anymore? Is that why? I take that personally.
I meant to send an email.
Is this personal experience?
None of us know how to read, so the email would have been lost on us.
But kind of, yeah. Like, what if I am surrounded by stupid people?
Well, like,
Is my brain capacity still going to increase
Yeah,
here?
so there are a lot of things you can do aside from hanging out with stupid people.
But don't you feel better about
But
yourself
actually,
hanging out with stupid people? You get dumber, but like,
Yeah, I felt great.
You know what?
look at the guy trying to work a faucet. What an idiot. But you know how to work a
Yeah,
faucet.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun to be stupid sometimes too, though. Honestly, like let's
what I keep
not,
telling
let's
myself,
not
yeah.
forget
No.
that stupidity waxes and wanes, and everyone has their moments. But. A sex differential, a gender difference in terms of
Do you want
cognitive
your-
How much
decline.
sex are you having
This-
if you're
this-
smart?
do you want your partner to die? Like, I think I can pull this off.
I've been.
If my husband dies,
I'm gonna-
whatever, it's not. I took his brain. I ate it.
I've been married long enough not to answer that question, or just to defer. Females win.
So Ted, so you said that. So even if we're sitting here right now and we're listening to everything that you're saying about learning about the brain, it's all about how we're actually perceiving that information, how we're storing it, and then furthermore, how we engage with it later. Are we remembering it and then teaching other people it? And that's the whole neurons fire together, wire together. More and more you repeat that information and keep teaching it, the more you'll remember it. And
Yeah, that's how you encode information into memory. Now, whether you retain that information oftentimes depend on whether you use that information. So, for example, when I was a kid, I used to be able to pop in the Contra cheat codes from heart. I don't. Up, down, left,
Up,
right,
down, left, right, B, A,
You're
start.
done.
start,
Yeah.
something like that. But
That's it.
I need
Wild
people, I need
hooker
cues.
appeared.
I need cues. I don't remember it as well as I used to, because I don't play Contra anymore. I still have it, but
I love that.
Why don't you play it anymore? It's a fantastic game.
Well, I've been accumulating video games across my entire life, so it's hard to devote time to every one of these games.
That's
Contra's
quitter
just one of
talk.
those- Yeah, it really is.
Twitter talk right there. I expect more from you, Jason Bateman.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And you lost it, right? You lost the ability to remember those cheat codes.
Yeah, because it became irrelevant.
Yep.
And I don't use it as much. But, you know, if I were prompted with a few cues, I could probably pull it back a lot faster than...
Yeah.
So is this
Had
where
I
your
never-
research is going, just so you can be a bit better video game player? Is that...
Well, that's a lot of it, actually.
Okay.
You know, later in the talk, I'll be talking about you know, what we could do to stimulate the brain, and I think video games is potentially an important part of that.
Ooh, that'll be
That's-
interesting.
Yeah,
Let's-
right?
All right, let's
That's
jump
great.
in.
I have one more question. Sorry. What if you do remember the cheat codes? Like, for example, you played The Sims growing up. Any fans? Rosebud or Motherlode, right? What does that say about your intelligence level, and is it high?
Are you asking
Can
for
you
a
just
friend?
tell Sam that she's smart? Can you just tell her she's smart?
Objection, leading the witness.
Sam, I think you're very smart.
Hey, Ted, we make the jokes.
Whoa,
Zing.
crushing.
No. But honestly, like, if you retain a lot of dumb information, is it gonna like impede your ability to consume new information, or
So-
like, are you all right?
Yeah, so in the end, you know, playing stupid games are not
The Sims is
necessarily...
not stupid. It's just not as like the same as.
I'm
everyone
sorry,
else.
I'm making a broader statement, not pointed at The Sims. Actually, I enjoy playing
She
The
will
Sims.
fight you.
Yeah, oh, for
You understand
sure.
that?
Yeah.
She will get up and fight you.
I enjoy
It's a
The
good thing
Sims,
Kevin's
like,
between you
absolutely.
guys, because
Yeah.
this get pretty
Yeah.
heated.
Sorry.
Contra versus Sims.
No, it's
Wow,
a great,
this is
It's
deep.
a great game. It's a great
So
game.
if you play nice, fun games like The Sims, continue.
The key is content. Content is king.
Or
There's
queen.
a lot of yeah. So it's not necessarily the storyline or exactly what the end goal is, like save the princess or build an awesome city or make a lot of friends or money or whatever the goal of The Sims is. I don't know if there was an end game, but
Build
the-
friends for when you don't have them.
Yeah, but it's more about
them
the
now.
complexity of it and the nuances and all the little things that you have to know. If you do this, then this is going to happen, and this is going to cause a chain reaction of events, and that causes you to think critically about all your actions and the future consequences of those actions. And by exercising your brain in such a way, it can actually help you in other contexts. Now,
Like strategy
I haven't
and-
seen any research actually studying The Sims per se, but that's really what I think the takeaway message is of video game research, is that the ones that really exercise your brain, the ones that make you think critically and think in different ways, to challenge you, to keep you engaged, those are the ones that really seem to benefit you in real life, and the ones that actually train fundamental cognitive functions that might show a transfer of benefit to your regular life. So, for example, you know, brain training games, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. There are thousands of games out there. And yet, I cannot hold on to this piece of paper. There's like a fan.
If you need it, you can.
That and the beer.
Wait,
But-
let me
but-
share just
but-
quickly. I just want to say one thing. So with like games, there are certain games like you've been saying that focus on strategy and resource management, teamwork, fine detail on the screen, being able to see things that other people don't see, task switching between things. There are games that we'll get into later.
Yes.
And you'll talk more about this.
Yeah,
as
we'll
well.
actually talk more about it on this
Alright.
point. I even have,
Sorry to
if you're
interrupt.
really listening, I kind of gave away, I think, an answer to one of the future questions. So,
Uh-oh.
I don't know if you're listening or not, but
Cool.
yeah, the point is there are a lot of video games out there that are designed, quote unquote, designed to train your brain under the premise that, well, if you don't use it, you lose it. So these brain training games, they exercise all sorts of forms of things that you might do. Pay attention, remember this, ignore that, see how fast you can respond, multitask, pay attention to that and that. You know, so all these games seem to be trying to
I feel like I'm talking to like a GameStop employee, just trying to sell me games right now. Like, okay, I'll get it.
Is there scientific proof that brain games like that, because there's 1,000 of them, is there scientific proof that they actually do
Well, let's
help?
find out. I
Let's-
think
You are
that's-
you are
yeah.
leading like the next 10
Yeah.
slides,
All right.
honestly.
On
That's a
to
great
the next
question.
question. We
So-
go.
I'm gonna ask
Ted,
this one.
let's have you read it.
Yeah, so basically, before we get into games too deep, let me just ask you, what do you think is the best way
Me?
to keep your brain healthy?
1 second, audience.
Best way to keep it healthy.
Dan's got it, you guys.
Not Dance Dance Revolution. That's not the answer.
Shit. I would imagine reading. I would imagine reading books that challenge you. Books like,
That's good.
things
That's
on
good answer. That's
Scientology,
good
stuff
answer.
like that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Quality reading. Yeah.
Transcendental
Challenges
books.
your mind.
Yeah, like reading books that challenge you to think in different ways and force you to build new neural pathways, things like
Yeah,
that.
Smart.
and get
That's a good-
audited
that's a
and
really good
spend money.
answer, yeah.
That's a good idea.
All right, let's go to the audience. All right, hold
Ooh,
on. hold
look
on,
at
hold on.
this.
Let's go to the back. We'll come to the front soon. All right.
Chess.
Ooh, look at that.
Saucy.
Classic
Saucy.
man.
No, that's
Not it.
He's a smart one.
Doing new things, trying new things on a regular basis. Learning
That's-
stuff.
It's a good another good answer.
Not it yet. Way up here.
Doing anything new that you're not familiar with, and
Learning a foreign language.
Ooh, those are
Okay.
both really good answers, and yes, they do help
That's.
improve the brain and keep it healthy throughout the lifespan. But
Exercise?
boom.
Oh, Eureka!
Damn it, I thought I won that
Ding, ding,
one.
ding, 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 ding,
Come on
ding.
down.
There we go. Come on down.
Idiot. I'm such an idiot.
Great job.
Good for you. Do you do a lot of exercise?
I lost
Today
one
was
at
my
the same
first time working out since February.
All right. Do you?
He's so much smarter.
Good for her. Do you work out your core muscles? Have you ever tried one of these? This here.
Wait, should we demonstrate?
Let's try it.
That's bowling.
See that? Oh, he can't even do it. Here. Now this will help your brain. I promise you. So why don't you try it? But first, yeah. Why don't you try? First, I'm going to ask you a little math question. What is 8 plus 2 plus 3?
13.
That's great. Now I'm going to do the exercise. Try it. You want to give it a shot? Give it a. You can do the best you can. Let's see if you can do it.
8 plus 2 plus 3, that's the word you
So what's go on?
Embarrass me, please.
8 plus 2 plus 3.
No.
No. All right, give her a round of applause. She tried. Now you can keep working on your six-pack.
Well, okay, those were all fantastic answers, but
They
why exercise over everything?
So that slide is
that's
just
so
creeping me
cute.
out for some reason. I was going to talk about poodles, I
Aren't those
think. I'm
things
not
usually
exactly sure
total
where I was going with
opposition,
this.
though?
You can talk about poodles.
Yeah, I know.
Human poodles.
So exercise has been shown time and time again. If you look at the literature on improving the brain and keeping it healthy, the most robust finding really is exercise, aerobic exercise particularly. There's evidence that it improves a vast amount of different cognitive functions, attention, working memory, sustained attention, whether it's short or long-term memory.
Is that because
cognitive
it's so
control.
boring that you force your brain to occupy itself? Is that
Yeah.
why?
Well, the funny thing is it gives you this, what we would say is a transfer of benefit, meaning that you do one thing, like exercise, and it transfers to an improvement in a different task that you didn't train on, such as memory.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why might that be? Well, it's not a Eureka question.
She was actually exercising her arm right
like, I
there.
know
She's
exactly
like,
why
brain
that
cell,
is.
brain cell.
Well, to put it this way, your brain is about 3%, 2 to 3% of your body mass, and yet it consumes about 20% of your metabolic energy. That is an incredible, disproportionate amount of energy that your brain requires just for you to think and go about your day.
And does that include both caloric intake and also oxygen, or some?
I'd have to look at the papers to see exactly how they
okay.
calculated that, to be honest with
So
you.
like when I'm
But-
thinking about something real hard, like directions, am I burning like a ton of calories at that point? Like say I have a real tough time with directions. I'm really great with them. It's great. But like say I had a real
Google
tough
Maps.
time. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know where the fuck I am at any time, which is for dumb people. But say that was my plight. Like if I have a difficult time with it, is it using up more energy?
Yeah, if your brain is more active, it requires more energy.
That's such great news.
So dumber
So-
people have more active brains?
That makes
Dumber-
sense. They have
so-
really fit brains because they're thinking all the time because they're so dumb.
That sounds like a super dumb answer, I think. Now, what about what exercises are good? I mean, we're talking squats. What do we?
So in
I love
general,
my-
in general, aerobic exercise seem to be the best just because, as I said, the brain requires a lot of energy. And how does it get that energy? Well, the blood has to take it there, right? So if your heart isn't healthy, your brain isn't healthy. You're literally starving your brain, right? So aerobic exercise, time and time again, has really shown the greatest transfer of benefit to these other cognitive functions. However, you can see greater gains if you couple aerobic exercise with things like strength training and flexibility training.
Like walking up the stairs. Got it.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to be so much smarter after this show. Boy, the book club will be impressed.
I'm going to try to get home, and then we're going to walk up some stairs. Sounds good. All right.
Ted, even something as simple as standing up and doing a few jumping jacks while you're working and then sitting back down can bring blood flow up there, and you can get back into a good flow.
Yeah, I mean, it's thought that you need to at least, like there's debate in what is the minimum, right, amount of exercise you need to reap benefits. Some people will say as little as 10 minutes. Some people will say as little as a half hour of walking. I think in the end, 10 minutes of maybe something very brisk and that really raises your heart rate, or 30 minutes of something that moderately raises your heart rate. But in the end, you want to raise your heart rate above its resting state and get that blood pumping, And so the more intense the exercise is, the less amount of time you probably need to engage with
But
it.
if it's about blood pumping, then aren't my options I can exercise or I can just do like a headstand? Right? In my office,
Yeah,
I can just stand in my head and say, guys, I need to think. Give me a moment. And I go down.
Get all the blood up.
All the blood. Now I know the answer. The PowerPoint slide must look like.
That sounds like an awesome experiment.
Yeah.
We gotta have to
Okay, we'll
talk
do
about
that. All
this.
right.
Yeah.
All right.
I think the NA.
All right, we got something?
like
Great.
that.
And so there are a lot
I'm
of people
working on
that will-
science now, guys.
A lot of people will work out in the mornings before they start their day, and that's something that you recommend as a neuroscientist.
I think the key is to really. I'm not exactly sure about when, if it really matters. It's more about just doing it. Getting your heart pumping, get the blood flowing, whether it's in the morning or later in the afternoon or periodically throughout the day.
So you're
Again,
saying, though...
these are things that hasn't been systematically pieced apart.
Great.
In
So I
the
want you to
literature,
systematically talk about it. So 10 minutes of any hardcore activity and you're good?
What if you eat?
Wait,
really
hardcore? Wait,
What if you
what
eat
does
a steak
hardcore
really
mean?
fast, or like a jar of
That could be-
Nutella really quick?
So if I do hardcore activity,
Hardcore activity. Which also, for me and,
Yeah.
and for some other people in
It's
here.
not, of course, that's not as simple as that, but it would definitely help. It's better than doing 10 minutes of sitting on the couch watching TV. 10 minutes of actually getting your heart way above resting level is definitely going to be better than not doing
What if you're yelling at the TV?
That's a good idea.
That's a really great question.
You're watching what,
sports,
Fox
you're intense-
News, and you're just
yeah,
screaming.
Yeah, you're all stressed out. The
Yeah.
stress might actually counteract any benefits you get from the elevated heart rate.
So
No
getting
shit.
upset
Yeah,
doesn't
so you got to
help.
think a little bit more holistic. So the stress is a bad thing.
You can't do the too much
And-
drama
and-
workout. How fucking dare you?
Yeah. And there's a lot of factors at play here. You can't just exercise and then not sleep, eat like shit. Just like there's obviously a lot more that goes into your body to keep it healthy. And you keep your body healthy, it will treat your brain well.
Learn that second language and read the
That's
book.
exactly
and
why
all
some of
that
those
stuff.
everyone playing chess,
Yeah, that was good.
doing
That was
something
good.
new, all these other things,
That was good.
all the responses were completely accurate, and they are ways to keep your brain healthy, especially the bilingualism. Learning a
Especially-
second language is an incredibly good way of keeping your brain sharp throughout the lifespan.
How about forgetting a second language? I'm pretty good at that.
I've forgotten so many
Ditto.
languages.
Yeah. I
So
know,
you were
right?
talking about working out in the morning. Is it true that it's better to do creative tasks in the morning? That's when your brain is the most refreshed. Like, when do you write stuff? Do you like write in the morning?
Yeah, I would say the morning.
Yeah. Is
Whatever works for you, right?
Well, that's
if you can
really
stay,
not
if you can be
necessarily
attuned to who you are and
This
where
psychic
you,
reading
you know.
sucks.
This is going to be a really good question. Let's move on.
Yep. All right. haha.
So getting back to the original point, there are many ways to stimulate your brain. Exercising is commonly shown to be the best way to do it. But, as I said before, exercising your brain, not just your body, but exercising your brain is another good way to keep your brain healthy. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. There are thousands of brain training games out there. So now the question
GameStop.
is, How many of those games are FDA approved for mental health?
Comedians, thoughts?
I'm gonna go with 1 million. I think that's
All of
probably the
them.
right
All
answer.
of them are approved.
All
by
of
the
them are
FDA.
approved. I saw the sticker on the cartridge.
I'm gonna say it's a little less than that.
I'm gonna say the Grand Theft Auto games because you got to figure out like, am I gonna steal this tank? Where am I gonna bury the hooker? Like that
Right.
kind of stuff.
A lot of
It's
problem
a lot of planning, a lot of
solving, yeah.
frontal lobe stuff going on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's highly engaging.
Yeah.
Very, very useful. But
How many people
don't
can I
think the
run over
FDA 's-
in this Plymouth? That kind of stuff. Yeah.
So I'm gonna do a crazy answer. I'm gonna say 0.
Ooh.
Based
Oh.
Is it
on
decent
the
thought?
nature of your talk
possible?
and how I think you're a video game salesman. I'm gonna go with 0. Yeah.
He's a stock
audience?
owner in GameStop. Yeah.
I know you do.
All right, let's take the front this time. All right.
I want to say 17.
Yeah, I also think it's 0.
Eureka.
Eureka!
Ding, 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 ding.
0.
17.
Come on down.
Why is the FDA involved in video
Let's
games?
get you something.
We'll get into that.
Okay.
Let's give you something to stimulate your brain. If video games don't work, this is a anti-migraine pack. I'm
can you
sure
put-
it's FDA
can you
approved.
show
You want
us?
to put it on quickly?
Yeah, you want to put it on? Show us how.
So you put that, I think, in like the freezer, and then you put it on your head there, above on your forehead. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and then you go to the Folsom Street Fair. You're like,
a
let's
squishy
party.
Tiara.
Look at that. Give her a round of applause.
It does actually.
All right. So yeah, explain. What are all these
So
these posts that all these different journals are talking
yeah,
about?
so the reason why the FDA hasn't really approved any video game for mental health, the reason why they would approve it is so a doctor can actually say, you know what, instead of this drug, play this game. That just sounds insane, right? But
That's what like doctors give you like a medical marijuana card, or basically
I
saying
know,
to
right?
you.
Yeah, like here you go.
Here.
Also, like what?
Yeah,
kind
I'm
of drugs are
gonna
we
couple
talking about?
that video game with a pop prescription and
Yeah.
Now, the reason why it hasn't really been approved by the FDA is because no one's really tried to get it approved, and no one has really tried to get it approved yet, at least in the many years past. We'll get into what's actually going on currently, but historically, no one's tried to approve it because, well, this is what scientists have to say. These are titles of papers in the science. No, go back.
Oh, you want to see
Yeah.
That's
Here we
just
go.
a bro crime.
These are the scientific papers. These are titles saying, do brain training programs work? Training the brain, fact and fad in cognitive and behavioral remediation, consensus on the brain training industry from the scientific community.
Snooze
So,
fest.
Yeah.
it's very boring. It's not
Wish we
catchy
could
at
learn
all.
this
You're
through a
right.
video game, right?
And the answers that come from these papers are also snooze fest because they don't say yay, they don't say nay. But what they basically say is that maybe. We don't have enough data. We need better controlled trials. We don't know exactly whether it works. The amount of evidence that's currently out there would indicate that you get better at the game you play at, but in the end, what we want is that transfer of benefit. I don't care if you get better at this video game. The real goal is to try and get better out there in the world when you're not playing that video game. And that's what we would consider a real transfer of benefit. And so there's limited evidence that there is some transfer, but usually that occurs when the transfer happens to be the same cognitive function you trained on.
Okay,
right?
let's dive into. Well, before we do the transfer benefit, because that's going to come up in a second. What are you doing with games? Because this is a new field. The pharmaceutical industry is obviously not having it. They're not interested.
Actually,
in it. Or
that's
they're
not entirely
oh, let's
true.
hear it then.
The pharmaceutical company is actually the company. Yeah, multiple pharmaceutical companies are investing in video game research because they're interested in
They're not just
great.
bored.
in
Like, I'm just
potentially
gonna play the
upcoming, therapeutics.
But they're not doing that with marijuana.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, right?
Well,
Yeah.
Okay,
Anyway,
so you guys are building out specific games at Neuroscape.
yeah. So currently we're dealing with about 6 different games, some of which are completed and we're testing, some of which we're still in development stages. And so what we're doing at Neuroscape at UCSF is one of the things, and we're dealing with a lot of different projects, but one of our main goals is to just assess the utility of brain training games to be a therapeutic, to actually show transfer of benefit. In what capacity can video games actually help you out there in the real world? We're not necessarily trying to look to see if you get better at the game. We're trying to see, do you get better at something else from playing that game? And if so, what happens in the brain in response to that training?
Do you think I should then remove my luminosity scores from my resume? Is that like not appropriate? Dude, I got some great. Okay.
So that's actually, I don't want to call out Lumosity, but they make a great example for why the media went from those scientific titles to this is a little more exciting. No, you're right. Go back one. Those are the media titles. Brain games are bogus. Brain training is a good idea that didn't work. Brain training doesn't make you smarter. That's what the media took from the scientific papers. They really latched on to the cases where there wasn't replication, or it was a poorly controlled trial, and so it's unclear whether it was actually an effective video game training or it was just a placebo effect. If you just tell someone, look, do this for a little while and you'll see an improvement, a lot of times people will improve just because they think they're going to improve. So you really have to control these games in a way that the control group and the test group are playing games that they both think will improve their mental function. And that's the real trick. But now here, no, I'm sorry, just stay on this, yeah. So the reason why I brought up Lumosity is that some of these titles were also driven by the fact that the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, they cracked down on Lumosity. If you're not familiar, is one of the bigger brain training companies out there. They're based.
Yeah,
they're
I'm
based in
super
the
good at
Bay
getting the
Area,
trains
they're-
into the place where the trains go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, there was a company founded by neuroscientists at Stanford, or psychologists at least from Stanford, and they're smart guys. They know what they're doing. And they do research. And that's the other thing, is that they actually do research. But they got fined by the FTC because their marketing department made a claim that playing these games might not just improve your memory, which it very well could, because you're doing these memory training games, but they didn't. But then they went on to say that it might help stave off dementia, that it might prolong the onset of Alzheimer's disease or something like that. They never showed that. So now all of a sudden, well, you're making claims that are overreaching what the data says, and so there's this backlash where you're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So it's not that it's not true. We don't know it's true or not. So it's just too early to say those kinds of things. And that's kind of what we're working on, and many other labs around the world are working on the utility of playing video games.
That was a $50 million fine, right? Ish?
It was a $50 million fine, but they couldn't really afford it because, it's $50 million. So they got it whittled down to about $2 million.
That's some
Okay.
good whittling. That's
Yeah.
some pretty strong whittling.
You look like you know how to whittle too, by the way.
I'm taking some classes.
Yeah. You should teach me some whittling.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get together.
And
Okay,
then
well, whittle.
they also had to offer their clients a means for a refund.
So how
So
do
that could
you
be-
how do you avoid as you build the games? How do you make sure the transfer of benefits actually occurring, and how do you avoid making claims like that?
So first of all, I do research. I don't own a company. I have no vested interest in whether these things work or not. I don't really care. Honestly, I want to know the truth. That's the basis of science,
Amen.
right? Like,
And play video games at the same time.
I love playing video
There it
games,
is.
right?
I swear to God,
so
if I
maybe I'm
went-
a little biased just because I want to play video games
I bet
and I want to justify.
if we
it in
went
some
to your
way.
lab, could we determine when you're doing research, when you're just playing video games? Is there like a...
Well, we have to do a lot of piloting. We have to do
I
a lot of
see.
testing to make sure it's fun
Gotcha.
and engaging, right?
Oh.
I think it's
But,
a lab coat. If he's wearing a lab coat.
Okay, then
Yeah.
he's
Research.
it's
Yeah.
research.
Yeah.
Okay.
If he's eating Doritos, it's probably a video game.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, that's good
You
observation.
can always look at the eyes too if they're red.
Because the
Telltale
Dorito dust.
sign. Yeah, the Doritos.
Yeah.
Got that. So
Maybe tell us more about the actual games too, like rhythmicity.
yeah, so I'm trying to think what the next slide was, if it's getting into rhythmicity or not. So yeah, no, that's fine. So yeah, some of the things that we're really looking into are like Alan just said, we're assessing. I have a video game that we've developed called Rhythmicity. There's a lot of evidence out there indicating that playing a musical instrument can actually improve various cognitive functions. And so so we've created a video game in lab that teaches you basically how to drum on a tablet. Just tap to the beat. A lot like Rock Band or Guitar Hero, where you have these cues, you kind of tap to the beat, and it's fun, it's engaging, and what we're trying to do is see if we can improve timing and expectation abilities, because that is the basis of rhythm. And that's why we call it rhythmicity, right? Because we're trying to teach people how to be better drummers. But the point is, you know, when you get older, a lot of these timing abilities decline. And a lot of the research that I've shown and others have shown is that as you get older, you stop engaging expectation mechanisms to predict a future event, which also is a fundamental element to rhythm. But now, what is the real utility of being able to predict a future event? Well, a lot of people, well, since the 1800s, have been hypothesized that the brain is nothing more than an expectation-generating machine. You're always anticipating the next event. It's what enables you to predict the next word that is going to come out of my... How did you get
Earlobe.
How did you
Yeah.
earlobe? Yeah, exactly. Right. No. So, so that when you hear or see the things that you expect, your brain processes it very quickly, very efficiently, and you can move on. Or conversely, if I'm going to tell you, oh, I want you to remember this face, and I show you a face, you can anticipate a face, and you can actually engage regions of the brain that process the face, so that when you see it, you encode it with a higher fidelity, and you'll subsequently remember it better. So what we're trying to do is engage expectation mechanisms through rhythm in hopes that by improving timing and expectation, we can see benefits that are fundamental to many other cognitive functions, such as memory, or cued memory, really. Not just all memory, but when you're given a cue, can you engage your brain in anticipation of that item that you're supposed to remember?
So the brain is an expectation-generating machine. So I basically let down my parents' brains. I think that's what's happened in my life.
So I have this picture up here for a reason. I mentioned that, you know, there was an FTC crackdown on brain training games, and I pulled this picture from a brain training company, and they make claims that if you play their game, you'll see things like faster neural processing, reversal of age-related slowing, less likely to develop depressive symptoms, lower medical cost, improved locus of control, 2 times faster visual. I mean, it just keeps going on and on. I'm not going to tell you right now, but I'll tell you in a bit because I don't want you to Google it and ruin it. But how many of you think? So this is real. They're making claims of transfer of benefit right here, right? You're talking about playing video games and seeing 38% fewer dangerous driving moves. You know,
Well, what if you're playing the video game while you're driving? Does that count? That's what I do.
I think that's a 100% increase in
Candy
dangerous driving.
Crush, the car crush. Okay.
Yeah. So, how many of you think that this picture here is still up? On their website. How many,
On the screen, yes.
How many of you think that this picture was up before the FTC started cracking down on video games and their claims that they need to make? Well, the answer actually is it's still up. I pulled this up just a few days ago, actually.
God damn it.
Yeah.
But wouldn't they
So
get
now,
a big
why are they
fine?
able to make these claims? Because they have data supporting every one of those claims.
What?
But now here's the catch.
I wonder how they test the
this is-
dangerous driving.
You're right. Actually, I did some research that they didn't make any of the claims on here, but I worked with this company. It's Posit Science. I think this particular one is their Brain HQ. Again, I'm not trying to pitch it because I have no vested interest in whether people use this or not. Honestly, it's no sweat off my back whether they do or don't. And I did a study to just assess the utility of some of these brain training games. And we did see a positive effect, and we saw a transfer of benefit. What we did was we took one of their low-level visual processing training mechanisms to see how your task was to detect what they call sweeps, but it was visual movement. It was motion. And there were very fast directions of movement, and you had to determine whether it was moving in a certain direction and that was it. It was very low-level, very simple task. And what we saw was that not only do you get better at the task, who cares, you actually get better at discriminating other types of motion, and that you get better at remembering those directions of motion. Now, we could say that's a transfer of benefit because they weren't trained on memory, but at the same time, what we ended up doing, what the brain training game ended up doing was training a very fundamental cognitive mechanism. It was your ability to discriminate very fine movements. And so if I were to tell you, remember this direction of motion and that direction of motion and hold them in memory, well, if you can't discriminate them, how are you going to hold them in memory? And how are you going to be able to accurately discriminate between the two?
Is this important for like interpretive dance? It's like
little
this,
bit,
but
yes.
not this.
Yeah.
This. Okay.
A trained eye
I'm
would
just
be
trying
able
to apply it to the
trained
real
eye would be
world.
able to detect that.
Okay,
but an
good to know.
untrained eye
I'll
wouldn't
play
be
more
able
of
to
these
appreciate
games.
your dance. Yeah.
That's good.
So I like your dance.
Thank you. I appreciate it. My confidence is boosted.
Posit science? Posit science?
Yeah, and this particular thing came from Brain HQ, but it's really irrelevant. But the point is that what we saw was a transfer of benefit, but really it was a transfer of benefit because we enabled them to see the stimuli better. So and that's where a lot of the problems lie, where people say brain training is bogus or it's hard to replicate. It's because a lot of studies don't necessarily look for transfer of benefit that rely on a fundamental cognitive feature or something that has in common. What we saw was almost akin to make a gross generalization, it's almost as if we were saying, I want you to remember this, but take your glasses off before you look at it. And then after training, put your glasses on, and now you can see it better. So now, do you remember it? Do you remember it now just because you can see it better? Well, that's basically what we did. We trained a fundamental cognitive function, your ability to perceive minute differences. And so when you train these fundamental functions, just like exercise, why does exercise improve various cognitive functions? It's because everything your brain does requires energy. If you're not feeding your brain, nothing's going to work right. And so we can say that's transfer to all these different domains.
Yep.
But is it really transfer? All you're really doing is putting gas in the tank of your car. Or actually, a better analogy would be putting a battery in your car, because nothing works without your battery. At least without gas in your car, you can listen to the radio.
You see, you thought this all out, apparently. Let's feed the brain again and go with the next question.
Yeah, let's
feed
do
the
it.
brain for the audience.
So how do you get a transfer of benefit? What's the best way? And there's actually, you need, and again, so just to qualify this question and the subsequent answer, this is my interpretation of it. It's not, we don't know for sure, but from what I can tell, there's two things that really seem to be important.
So say you have to pee like really badly.
Yeah.
Is it peeing when you need to pee really badly?
Thanks for reminding me that I need to pee.
She needs to pee really badly. Look at that. She's actually going to transfer her own benefit to another place right now. Keep drinking liquid, everybody, and hold it in. Let's go for the audience, see if somebody has an actual answer.
You have to know a Nigerian prince, right?
Okay.
And he knows a lot of people with an email address. That's
And
basically
that's
it.
part of it. And then the other thing is you need a lot of money to give to that person.
Yep.
Yes, yeah.
That's it.
You need
And
routing
the
numbers
number,
and yeah.
Tight feedback loops?
Tight feedback loops. Yes.
That's it, all right?
Yeah.
Eureka!
You get a whole brain?
Come on down.
Tight
You get
feedback.
whole brain.
Yeah, so another way to say that is adaptivity, keeping you engaged. You don't want the game to be too easy because you're not actually exercising your brain. You could do that in your sleep. And you don't want it to be too hard because then you'll just quit. And you don't really try anymore. You want it to be in that sweet spot, and that's where these closed loops come in. That's where you really need the adaptivity to keep you in that sweet spot. If you're not engaged, you're not really stimulating your brain, right? That's the key here.
You got to be aware, too. That's why we got you Awareness Games. This wonderful book, Awareness Games, has a multitude of different games to keep you more aware. Do you want to read what this one is right here?
Think the thought, I have a body. Then ask yourself, who is this I that has a body? It's like Passover.
That's deep, isn't it? Yeah, dwell upon that, my friend. All right, there you go. Round of
This gentleman's
applause.
hair, that's an amazing hair. That is fantastic. Wow.
He's going to be thinking about his body for the rest of the show.
I love that guy's hair.
So philosophical. Who is this I? All right. So what were you saying? Go a little more deep.
So I'm not sure how deep you want me to go. Because
Well,
I think we're at what, question 5?
Yeah, we will. We'll move on. I just want to say, okay, maybe we've chatted about this before, so it's maybe a good way to try and explain it. If I am a midfielder in soccer and I play soccer, am I going to become a better cross-country runner?
I think that would be a fair transfer of benefit,
Okay.
right? Because you're exercising the same muscles that are used in both soccer and cross country. Soccer players run a lot, so do cross country players.
Yeah.
So, we could consider that a transfer of benefit because they're not the same task, but they're using the same muscle groups. So it's not entirely unfounded that you'd have this transfer of benefit.
Cool. I got another one. If I am a stand-up comedian, will I eventually please my parents?
If they have a sense of humor, yes, you will.
It's a legit answer.
Not looking so hot. Yeah. All right. Cool. How about earning money? Is that going to come into play? Maybe. Nope. The audience says no. Big trivia win for you. It's nothing. Just like me.
Okay.
You must feel better though. You
Sam,
transferred your benefit earlier.
No,
Yeah.
I feel great now that I peed.
Okay.
Sam, I think you're very much something.
Aw, Dan.
Yeah, I think you're something.
Dan's great too. You
No.
can find us all the time here at Piano Fight.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
So let me give you a quick example of what my colleagues and I here at UCSF have seen in terms of transfer of benefit in video games. So the top picture here is a very, well, looks a little bit like pole position maybe. If you're old enough, I'm gonna date you all. Well, that literally did, but you know what I mean. Like it's telling how old you are if you know this game.
Pole position.
So we created a game, well, this game we called Neuro Racer, although when we were trying to come up with a title, to be honest, I pitched Brainy Racer. But people, when you say it enough, Brainy Racer, Brainy Racer, Brainy Racer. Sounds.
Okay.
All right, so I told two terrible jokes. This game basically asks you to multitask. That's what you do whenever you're driving a car. You're trying to keep your car on the road and at the same time trying to figure out where you need to go. So you need to look at the road signs. And in this case, you're told to detect the green circles. So here's a green pentagon. So you don't want to respond to that. Just the green circles. So ignore all the other shapes. And not surprisingly, as you get older, our ability to do this task declines. What may be a little more surprising, and getting back to your peak neuroplasticity, the greatest decline that we saw so it peaks in the 20s. We studied people
Ends at
from
35,
about 10 to
I remember.
80.
Yeah.
And it peaks in the 20s, and the largest drop-off was 20 to 30. And the 30-year-olds actually showed the greatest decline, but then from decade to decade, it's just a sort of a linear drop-off in the ability to multitask, to do this game.
Even though the weight loss is most towards the end.
Yes,
The weight
that's
loss
right.
is most towards
It
the
was
end, but the cognition
still-
loss is most.
Yes, it was still a relatively linear trend.
Is everyone thinking about their age right now? Is that just going through? Yeah. Okay.
Or how much you've done in your life so far.
But here's the thing, and as I said at the beginning, the brain remains plastic throughout the lifespan. And so what we did was we took our older adult population and we asked them to play this game for a month. And, well, they got better. But not only did they get better, they actually matched 20-year-olds. So that's pretty impressive.
How old were they?
60 to 80.
60-year-olds were as good as 20-year-olds at the game?
Yeah, 80-year-olds were as good as 20-year-olds
Oh my
after practice.
goodness.
It was a
Who are
month of
these
practice.
80-year-olds?
Yeah. But you just get better at the game. That was a month of practice.
What did
So
that
if you were
transfer
to
to?
give the 20-year-olds a month of practice,
Oh.
they're going to be better than the 80-year-olds.
Oh,
right?
okay, so different amount of
it's- yeah, yeah.
time.
But we're
Oh.
just saying that they, with practice, got
Off
to
the
the
bat,
level
yeah.
of 20-year-olds without practice.
Cool.
Ah.
So
But it's still encouraging to know that they got better. But here's where it actually gets interesting. We tested a few other cognitive functions, and what we saw was not only did they get better at the game, but they got better at sustained attention and working memory, your ability to remember. In this case, we tested their ability to remember faces in the context of distraction.
And to sustain their attention for long periods of time.
How about their thumbs?
Yeah,
Are
yeah.
the thumbs
And
just
so-
crushing it at that point?
Yeah,
Just
so-
80-year-old thumbs.
Yeah,
just look
they're
at this.
just
It's got 20-year-old thumb.
Nothing but thumb.
Nothing but thumb muscle.
mass
It's
right
huge.
There. Yeah, it's amazing.
Sweet. That's
Huge
what I need.
calluses is
Just giant
crazy.
thumbs.
Yeah. But
Look at my thumb.
so why would we see this transfer of benefit? Well, if you think about what they did for this training, they're driving a car and responding to street signs. That means if you're driving a car, you don't get a break. You always have to stay on the road. Yeah. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to put on the cruise control and
Not
not
if you have a
off for a couple
Tesla.
minutes," All right. You got me, but not in the
Dude,
world of pole
2007.
position.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
But in general, you can't just nod off. And so it's a little less surprising once you think about what they were actually doing, right? So they were exercising their sustained attention by playing this game. And then we also saw a transfer of benefit to working memory, your ability to remember these faces. Well, that's a little more surprising, but again, think about what they were doing. When you're driving a car, you really want to look at the road and where your car is in relation to that road. Now, when a street sign comes up, you need to take your eyes off that road and off your car and look at the sign and make a judgment. Well, there's no such thing as moving one eye up and one eye down. Like both eyes are on the car, on the road, or both eyes are on the sign. Never, and that's why people will claim that you can't multitask, at least within the same sensory modality. Like I can listen to you and drive the car just fine, but I can't look at you and look at them at the same time. Like my eyes can only go in one direction.
But what about peripheral vision?
What do you do when you are, well, peripheral vision, actually, we kind of skipped over that slide, but what you're doing when you're doing this task is you're holding in memory a motor plan to stay on the road while you're processing that sign. So you are exercising your working memory while you're doing this task. So it becomes less mysterious why there's this transfer of benefit when you actually think about the fundamental cognitive functions that are involved in the training. So just to keep the ball rolling, what's cool now is that below is basically the same game, except it was designed with cooler graphics, a better interface. It's played on a tablet instead of a joystick, and it's created by a company called Achille. The game is called Project Evo. It's not for sale. It is a game that is purely designed to see if it could actually have any benefits in the clinical domain. So it is currently going through, I believe, phase 3 clinical trial, and it is, later this year we'll know whether the FDA actually approves it as the first video game to be able to be prescribed to children with ADHD. That's what they're testing
people
it out
taking
with.
acid, for Christ's sakes. Look at this thing. Jesus.
Yeah.
Children taking acid, maybe. That's a development process.
So we're talking kids, they're how old, and they're having signs of attention deficit. It's difficult for them to focus. But when they spotlight their attention on a game like this, you're saying that in the future a doctor could potentially prescribe the kid Project Evo.
Yeah, so the idea is that by playing this game or these types of games, that you exercise your ability to maintain focus for long periods of time, which is more so than what you would get from a kid with ADHD, say, sitting in a classroom listening to their teacher. That's oftentimes what triggers a parent or a teacher to send their kid to the doctor and say, oh, this kid, he can't sit still, he can't listen. Well, it's incredibly boring to listen to teachers often, teaching is a very difficult task, and to engage everyone's attention simultaneously is an exercise in futility. But, if you are able to, come on, I'm not going to pretend that everyone in this room is listening to me right now.
Don't be so hard on yourself. You're doing a great job. Yeah.
I do.
But the greater point is, just if we see transfer of benefit in that game, can we see transfer of benefit in that game? And if so, does it have clinically meaningful results? Meaning that, is it strong enough transfer that a doctor can actually recommend it instead of Ritalin? Would you rather give your kid drugs, or would you rather give your kid a video game?
But if you gave your kid Ritalin, they could play this game a lot longer.
Probably, yeah.
All right, should we move on to the next?
Yes, we do.
I have a quick question about that car game. You were saying that if you it's effective because during the game, adults can nod off, and during real life they can't. Is the game better?
No. Even on the game, you cannot nod off. The game is always playing. There's no break on this thing. There's no pull over to the rest area. There's no gas stations. There's no rest stops.
Okay.
I
thought you were saying the game's great because people just take naps.
Yeah, no.
It's I guess.
Yeah.
All
right, read it up. Read it off.
So aside from these brain exercises, can you name a way to non-invasively stimulate your brain?
What do you mean non-invasively?
So meaning
it means like not an arrow in the head.
So let's not talk about exercise. Let's not talk about brain exercises. And I don't want to hear about put an electrode into your brain.
Right.
That would be invasive. I don't want to hear about microchips and things like that implanted.
It looks like we got a lot.
Conversation.
Looks like the right hemisphere here has a lot of answers.
I was gonna say breathing or meditation.
That's kind of that's a brain exercise.
Brain exercise?
Oh,
Yeah. Brain exercise is such a large, encompassing field.
What do we got?
Sleeping or zoning out?
Ooh.
You know, I'm gonna just characterize all that as like meditation. or
Yeah,
brain
zoning out is
exercises.
meditation.
Sleeping
I'm gonna-
is
I'm
Just
pretty
there's a book.
It's tough.
Yeah, sleeping is crazy.
It's very
What
difficult.
about eating?
Eating.
Eating, yeah. Trying something new food-wise.
You know, that's fair, but I have something very particular I'm looking for. So, but honestly, I think that's fair.
Opening your eyes.
Yeah, like drugs, food. Like you're right. That is actually fair.
Making new friends and socializing.
Well, that's very sweet.
Again, that's a
Oh,
great
hugging
answer.
people.
Yeah, and that's
Is
a
it
great
hugging?
answer.
Like
That's-
conversation. Wouldn't conversation is not
The-
non-invasive? Like a stimulating conversation?
You're right. It's non-invasive, but that again, why does that work? Why would that improve your brain? It's because you're exercising your brain.
Right.
Right.
Okay. So I'm wrong? Is that what it is?
So I think eating is the closest we've gotten, really. But I'm looking for something a little more specific to really just as a segue to what the next thing I want to talk about. Here's a hint. We talked about it right at the very beginning. No. You can guess.
Sex.
I can put that under the category of eating.
Yeah.
I would say one's
Or
a
actually,
little better than the
that's
other.
just zoning out.
That's zoning
in
out.
my bed.
Yeah, it
That's what
depends on
that
how you
is.
do it, I guess.
Yeah, like where am I? What happened?
I was gonna say porn, but you took that, so I'll say taser.
Tasers.
What about taser porn? What about that?
Taser porn.
That's good.
Yeah.
That stops
You
the
know
zoning out part.
All right, where was that? All right, hold on.
TMS.
Hey, Eureka!
Eureka!
All right.
Come on down.
But tip of the cap to the sex and the eating. Those, I think, are both really great ways to stimulate the brain.
TMS. Come down, sir.
I feel like zapping my brain is pretty invasive.
Yeah.
Guess what you get? Your own very own electrodes
I'm not even a scientist, but I think it's pretty accurate.
to put on your head. No, you can just
We'll have some time. Yeah. Come by.
you can just wear those. But you gotta promise you wear them somewhere, sir. Give him a round of applause.
Well played.
Just gonna have to figure out what to do with those electrodes.
So it's non.
The question is, how is TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, non-invasive?
Yeah. So these were anything off this list is really what I was looking for. You can actually just go to the next slide, which will summarize it a little bit easier. There are really three main forms of what's considered non-invasive stimulation.
Supercuts.
One
or
would be ultrasound. So it's sound. Would you consider sound to be invasive?
Yeah, a lot of the time.
Sorry.
Most of the time.
Most of the time,
Maybe
I
I should have
consider
better defined what's considered non-invasive in the medical world. If you don't drill a hole in your head, it's non-invasive.
But
If
you
you don't
zap it.
change your physiology in a way that really requires you to get inside your brain, you're right. Anything that you do is, eating's invasive, right? It's going into your body. Having sex is invasive. Come on, do I need to spell that out?
Versus putting things on or around
So-
your head, which is non-invasive.
Exactly. And so you're right, though. But the way it works, though, can be thought of as invasive. So, for example, ultrasound. The way that works is by sending sound waves, vibrations through your body. So, by vibrating your body, you're sending shock waves through your body. Well, that's not exactly invasive because I'm not actually drilling a hole into your head. Or
I like how
putting
that's
something-
the
yeah,
example.
yeah.
Anything
That's
other
my
than drilling the hole's
example.
fine.
Yeah. That's
I can stick my
basically
finger in
when
your
you,
ear all the way to. That's
Yeah.
So,
We're not actually putting a physical object that you can hold inside your body like you would with food or with genitalia.
Or with sex, yeah.
Yeah, so there you go.
Don't let the ball drop, darling.
You can't really hold vibration, right? That's not something, so
when
by
women
definition.
get ultrasounds, they're
my
actually
shaman
like,
told
So
me.
when you get an ultrasound, say if you're pregnant and you want to look at your baby, the frequency of the ultrasound is usually around 27 megahertz. That's 27 million hertz. The sounds that we hear range between 20 hertz, that's 20 cycles per second of sound air pressure, to 20,000 hertz. And so an ultrasound for your baby is, millions of times, stronger, or hundreds of thousands of times stronger.
So they should do a lot of hard thinking when they're getting ultrasounds.
Well, with the ultrasound for your baby and the ultrasound for brain stimulation, they're actually different frequencies. It's much lower actually because
Does nothing. Very useless.
yeah. With the higher frequencies, it just doesn't seem to be useful for us. There are certain frequencies that can cause burns and tissue damage, and so we don't do those frequencies in the brain. So at 6 megahertz.
Unless we're doing invasive.
Unless you're going invasive.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So which ones are you doing at Neuroscape?
So
and
we don't really mess with ultrasound. That's actually a relatively new technique within the last 10 years. People have been really I mean, the idea has been out there longer, but it's really gained some momentum in recent history, looking at how ultrasound can be used to actually cause neurons to fire. And so I'm not going to really speak a lot about that just because, well, I don't use it. But TMS and TES are two techniques that are much more researched, and those are things that I have experience in, so I'll spend most of my time speaking about these other two techniques. So TMS uses magnetic stimulation, transcranial magnetic stimulation. And the way it works is that you see this sort of what we call a butterfly coil. It's almost a figure 8. Well, a very strong current goes through that coil, and anytime you have a current, there's a magnetic field that surrounds that current. And that magnetic field can go non-invasively into your head. Now, what's important is the idea of electromagnetic induction. So electromagnetic induction means that anytime you pass a changing magnetic field into a conductor, you induce a current. So by pulsing a magnetic field into your brain, you actually induce a current, and that can cause neurons to fire. And actually, I think you felt that, right?
Yeah, so at Neuroscape, you put TMS on the left side of my motor cortex, and I had my right hand out, and you stimulated, and my right hand twitched.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Do you have one of those here today? Can we try that?
I wish I could have brought it. It's a little big,
That sounds
and I didn't really trust myself walking around with $100,000 worth of equipment down Eddy Street.
I don't know.
So, Alan, you've done it before.
Yeah, just a few times.
Okay, and what is it meant for other than making his hand twitch? What is it used for?
I think that's good enough right there. That's pretty cool.
I know.
I mean,
What could you possibly want? Puppetry. Is that not what we're all trying
Pinocchio.
to get into? Yeah. We'll get into that a little bit more in a minute, but basically we use it largely for mapping the brain to see what brain regions are communicating with other regions, and to understand, because we can both excite and inhibit neural activity using this type of technique, we can understand what regions of the brain are involved in specific cognitive functions. And currently, TMS is FDA approved for the treatment of migraine and depression.
So you're treating depression and migraine already with TMS?
I'm not, but other people are. Yeah.
Other people are?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what, with your research in TES and TMS, is that, we're going to get to that later, what you're specifically doing with them?
Yeah,
All right,
we'll touch on that in a little bit. Right.
We just need to keep hustling.
Yeah, we're
through
going
it
to
a
rapid
little bit.
fire these next ones.
So, real quickly, just how strong do you think that magnetic field needs to be in order to get those neurons to fire?
Pretty strong.
Hell is strong.
Yeah, very
Eureka!
Hella strong. Do I get something out of the box?
But how strong? Pretty
Yeah,
strong.
How strong?
strong? And what is our measurement? Megahertz? Is that an okay measurement,
so
or?
you can talk about it in terms of you can use Tesla, you can use Gauss, you could use it in relationship to the Earth's magnetic field, or maybe in relationship to your refrigerator magnets. Just something that you're familiar with, like.
Schwarzenegger, is that a new unit?
Is that a new? Yeah.
Super
right.
strong.
How strong?
How you pronounce that.
1.5 Teslas.
Is that
I'm going to say Eureka.
Eureka!
Oh,
Pretty damn close.
Eureka.
That's pretty damn close.
All
It varies
right.
from person to person, but you're right.
And you, my friend, get your own little magnet. I don't know how many megahertz this is. Not many, I don't think. I heart your brain. Here you go. Isn't that sweet?
Nice. All right.
Applause.
Yeah.
That's a good magnet.
Yeah.
So,
For his magnet, so 1 Tesla is roughly equivalent to about 200,000 times the Earth's magnetic field. Granted, that's an estimation because the magnetic field of the Earth varies from place to place and time to time. And again,
wait, you
the
need
amount of
200,000 times the Earth's magnetic force to fire a neuron?
Yeah, but again, that's a rough estimate because some people have different thresholds for firing, and so 1.5 is it's ballpark. That's pretty darn close. And it's probably true for some people.
Okay,
but it's roughly equivalent to that, and to make it maybe even a little more tangible, it's about 200 refrigerator magnets.
All right. So you only need 199 more, my friend.
Right. So
and then you can start firing those neurons.
Yeah, but before you start piling up all your refrigerator magnets
your
and
head,
rubbing them all over your head.
Will that work?
No.
Shit.
Well, let me give you a strong maybe.
Okay. All right.
No, but the
5 beers in.
It's about, yeah, I know, it'll totally work. I believe it. Just do it.
The drunk neuroscientist.
The idea is that with TMS, it's not just the magnetic field strength. It's the fact that it's a changing magnetic field. Remember, you either need to move the conductor through the magnetic field to induce a current, or have a static conductor and have a changing magnetic field. So when you apply a TMS pulse, that magnetic field only exists for about 200, 300 microseconds. So that's like, 2.2 milliseconds, 2/20,000ths of a second. So I don't think your hand can really move that fast to really get a changing magnetic field.
Still try it.
You can still try it. What the hell?
Yeah.
Give it a shot.
Don't listen to
right?
this guy. Don't listen to this guy.
Do that. Yeah.
Let's focus on that.
So transcranial electrical stimulation, that does not cause neurons to fire.
So you're right. Yeah. So TMS, depending on the intensity, will cause neurons to fire, or you can apply it subthreshold and still see interesting, effects behaviorally. But TMS is definitely within the realm of causing neurons to fire, and and there is a danger associated with it. If you apply it fast enough, long enough, you can induce seizures. But that's why we have safety protocols, and we never do those types of things in practice. But if you just happen to come across a TMS machine, you start playing with it willy-nilly, well, you might regret it.
Yeah.
Unless you like seizures. I mean, some people, I've actually talked to some people that say they enjoy
during
seizures.
After hours at his lab.
Sex, right? Yeah.
They enjoy seizures? You talk to people that enjoy seizures?
Yeah, I had a teacher once who said that he enjoyed his seizures, but they weren't, grand mal. They were
Right.
more
Petite malls?
Yeah, and he said that he had points of clarity where he just loved it.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, but this is a case study, right? So I'm not going to make general
199
claims that
do this, my friend.
largely people who are
Get to it.
epileptic do not want the epilepsy, and
Yeah.
so that's why people go in for invasive surgery, things like that, or invasive neural transplants. You can put electrodes in the brain that are always detecting neural activity, and if they detect the onset of a seizure, they will actually stimulate invasively. These electrodes exist all the time inside your brain, and they can stimulate and disrupt the seizure, because really a seizure is just coherent neural activity across the entire brain. It just starts in one region, and then it just gets more and more of the brain until they're all firing together, and that just causes you to seize up. But anyway, this is basically what sort of a version of a TMS coil looks like. There's a bunch of different types. I think I showed you a different one on a different slide.
That doctor looks really happy, and that
yeah,
woman does
maybe
not.
a little bit. I think he's enjoying his job a little bit too much. I think you're right. Yeah. So, as I said, it's approved for depression and migraine. But the tool itself, it stimulates a very small patch of cortex, only about the size of a dime. So it's not really hitting a large swath of cortex. It's a very small region of cortex. And because it's so precise, oftentimes you need an MRI first just to target the very specific neural region you want to hit. Wow. And so in addition to the cost of an MRI, which if you come to UCSF, I think our current going rate during business hours is about $700 an hour if you want an MRI.
What is it in non-business hours?
I think you get it down to about 500, maybe 450.
Cool.
Or something. Yeah, it's
a little
pretty
MRI after dark.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Bring him a six-pack. I'm sure he's good to go.
Yeah. So, but those are pretty, standard costs because these are $1 million MRI machines, or multi-million sometimes. But this TMS coil itself, depending on the bells and whistles you get for it, can range anywhere from $20,000 to say $100,000. And who has money for that? In addition to the precision to actually apply it. So it's not really useful for at-home use. It's useful in clinical context, and it's useful for our research purposes. So I use it to help map the brain. So I will try and find regions that I believe are involved in, say, attention or memory, and try to enhance or suppress those very particular regions of the brain to see if we can enhance or suppress performance. And the effects of TMS actually wear off within sometimes 10 minutes, 45 minutes. The best that I've seen, you can improve memory with TMS, but as far as I've seen, the best we've done is have those memory improvements for about a day. So it doesn't really seem to be a great, maybe therapeutic or something that you'd want in home. So
can you explain why? Have you guys figured out why it's so temporary?
The brain is incredibly plastic. You'd probably have to have longer sessions maybe in order for the brain to rewire. Honestly, it's really interesting why that might be, because I'm just about to talk about electrical stimulation, which doesn't cause neurons to fire, and yet we see, at least in the literature, people have claimed longer lasting effects, which is almost contradictory to what you might think. So
He looks
maybe
happy.
it's just that the research isn't fully there yet. So perhaps, and in the terms of depression, people have seen longer lasting benefits. But in terms of improving memory, the research really isn't there. We've seen benefits at least a day out, but not much longer than that. So, maybe it's just very specific to certain cognitive functions. We don't know. I'd like to say that these are new technologies, but I think the next question is,
It's a TES.
how old is transcranial electrical stimulation? Anyone have a guess?
You just did it yesterday.
Uh,
All right, 30 years is our first
30
guess.
years.
30 years.
A little bit older than that.
31 years.
31. Do I hear 31?
50.
Little
50?
older
50
than
years?
50.
60?
60.
Okay, it's older.
Older.
70. That's your age, though, isn't it?
Sing.
Boom. Did you invent this?
It's That's older than
fake
72.
laugh. I love that.
Well, I know. I have a fake. I don't have a soul. I don't have a soul.
85.
Older than 85.
Around that time?
Is older than Nikola Tesla.
Okay.
102.
Older than 102.
I like though that. Yeah.
Older than 400 years.
700 years.
Older than 700 years.
Whoa. You also invented a time machine.
I
didn't
gotta
you?
have someone.
Anybody else up there?
All right, hold on.
Way in the corner.
Hold on.
We're going.
3,000. 3,000.
Well, this is like an
Little less-
auction
little
for
less
a
than
pig or
that,
something.
yeah. Was it the very
I
first
see
thing
12,
ever
1,200,
invented?
300, 400, 500,
Less than
600,
that.
700.
Less than 3,000.
Less than 3,000.
So we have an upper and lower limit at least
I'm
now.
curious how the hell they actually stimulated the brain.
Yeah, yeah.
3,700.
It's under 3,000.
Oh, sorry. 2,700.
It's too high. It's not that old.
1,500.
It's a little older than that.
Look at this.
But it is a number, right?
Yeah, you
It's a
just
number?
give me a date, and if you get it the right century.
2017 years ago.
Eureka! Close
Eureka!
enough. Yeah,
Whoa.
pretty damn close. Pretty damn
Come
close.
on
Good enough.
down. Lindsay, look what we have for you. A TDCS journal.
Nice.
So that if you actually get your own machine and want to do some transcranial simulation, you can actually record your progress in this journal. Super useful to you. Enjoy that. Round of applause.
Lindsay, everybody.
She's on the stage as much as we are.
Yeah, I know. Lindsay's been in the show.
This is Lindsay's show officially.
Yeah,
This
killing
is.
it. Killing it.
Yeah.
You
All right.
yeah.
In the sake of moving on.
How the hell is it that old? What did they do to
So-
stimulate the brain electrically?
Yeah, so the
eat of fish.
Yeah. So that's why I have that torpedo fish or electric fish up there.
Oh my gosh.
That's basically
what?
the physician for Emperor Claudius. I forgot his name. Scorbinius
We believe you.
Let's go with that one. Yeah, let's go with that one.
Anyway,
Scavenius,
the point is, they
Lodius,
used these electrical fish.
Philippus, yeah.
That's how they did it. They didn't have batteries, but they had fish that can generate electrical currents.
Really?
And they used to treat it for headaches and gout.
Did they really?
Yeah.
So wait, how did they?
And that's
wait
the
a
first
sec.
documented case, right? So it could very well have existed long before that.
Did they take the fish out of the water, or they stick their head in the water and just hope the fish like clung on?
You know,
They ate it or they put it on their head?
They put it on their head or they put
Who
it on
had
their
the
feet,
idea
so-
that I have a migraine? You know what's going to help me out? That fish.
That weird freaking fish with electricity.
Who has that idea?
Probably a
I've
pissed
got
off
gout.
fisherman
Where's
or
the
something.
ocean?
You should see what the other things the Romans did, though. I mean, they're pretty crazy people.
All the arcs and stuff.
Well, and the applications were headaches and...
Yeah, headaches and gout. Basically pain. It numbs you. It's a very
How
numbing
long would it
experience.
shock you for? What would it do?
I wasn't there. I'm not exactly
Dude.
sure. 100%.
All right, moving on. Next question.
But yeah, it's a good question.
Just kidding. Never
So
mind.
people really didn't
I'm getting
use
that
it.
fish.
People didn't really use electricity much aside from that
Headaches.
case scenario,
Yeah.
headaches and maybe gout. And it's unclear how common it was, if that technology was lost between Roman times and into the 18th century. But then in Italy...
The electric dish technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
EFT.
And so in the 18th century, Galvani actually discovered this, what he thought was animal electricity, and that when you apply a current across these muscles, you can cause them to twitch in corpses, in animal bodies that are deceased. And it helped us understand the physiology of how our bodies and brains work. Now, Galvani's nephew, Aldini, I want to say his last name was.
We believe you.
That
Gary.
sounds about right. Yeah,
Sure,
I think so.
sure, yeah. I'm just going to start making
The
up names.
magician, yeah.
Yeah, well, so in the 19th century, this guy's nephew basically thought, oh, this is awesome. He started using it for other types of treatments, mania, and different types of cognitive problems. But what he really became popular for was sort of this freak show where he would take corpses in public and stimulate their faces so that their eyes would open or their muscles would twitch.
Wow.
And if you can imagine how freaky that would be today, how freaky do you think that would be around the time before the battery was invented, or around that time when
People
the...
just paid to see people's eyes open.
Yeah,
back in the
yeah,
day.
and
It's
so people
crazy.
speculate that
They
this
didn't
was
have YouTube back
actually,
then.
that this
Yeah.
guy was really the inspiration behind
That's
Mary
like a
Shelley's
19th century like
Frankenstein.
crazy Facebook stream. It's like, oh my
Yeah,
God, I can't
Yeah, and so electrical stimulation of the body really became somewhat taboo, if you will, because of the strangeness that became affiliated with it. And then, almost 100 years later, it comes back, where electroconvulsive therapy became used as a tool to help mitigate depression, mania, catatonia, several different types of problems by essentially, if you've seen or read the book, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Yeah, that's where they grabbed the picture from. They apply a very large current to induce a seizure, actually. That's the goal. And it's painful, and the largest side effect is long-term memory loss. And so people were really frowning on it, not just because it's ugly to watch, and you hear about these stories of people getting, ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, or electroshock therapy, which a lot of people refer to it more casually. And so it continued to sort of get this bad rap. But what's interesting is that ECT still today is used, and it's controlled a little bit better, of course. We've figured out the dosages.
I had a first date tell me she had ECT. It's like, okay, that date's over. I'm like, thanks for sharing.
I'm sure that contributed to her depression, because that's really what it's used for mostly, is really non-responsive major
Oh,
depression.
really? Okay. Well, now I feel horrible. Now I feel. Though, in my defense, she told me that after she mentioned that, she took out a restraining order against her ex, who also took out a restraining order against her.
Fair enough.
cute.
Yeah. You got a lot of red flags
Plus
there.
the ECT, I'm like, ooh, a keeper. Okay.
Yeah, all right, so
All right, moving on.
not one to
Mutual
judge.
restraining orders?
Yeah.
That's adorable.
Yeah.
So almost 100 years later, here we are in the 21st century, and we're using, actually, I use one of these caps. It's has different electrodes where you can place, and it can
wistful.
both record electrical activity and it can stimulate electrical activity.
That looks very cute.
Right?
In this 20th century picture,
Yeah.
what we're referring to as a lobotomy.
It helps-
What's the difference between a lobotomy and what you do in your job?
And what I do at my job? Ouch. So, first of all, this type of stimulation is about 1,000 times weaker than that type of stimulation. On the left,
Put them in the same pool. You're like, it looked bad before, but it's actually pretty cool now.
not that bad anymore.
It's like, I don't know,
So-
20th century photo looks pretty
Yeah,
bad.
it's pretty bad, but it's 1,000 times stronger. This is inducing a seizure. This is causing neurons to fire. This does not. It does not cause neurons to fire. It's actually very, very weak electrical current. And over the last 15, 20 years, there's been an exponentially increasing amount of data indicating that with these weak electrical currents, you can improve different cognitive functions based on a bunch of variables, but attention, memory, response times, speeding, things like that. And so it's become incredibly popular these days, and yet at the same time a little bit controversial, much like brain training, where there's a lot of variable results and hard to replicate.
Can you buy one of those?
You can, actually. They're commercially available.
Are you selling them after the show?
I am not, but I can tell you where to
check out
buy
the
them.
back.
Yeah, so there's different companies out there that sell them. Halo Neuroscience is a popular one. Focus, FOC.US, is another popular one. They kind of target gamers, whereas Halo really targets Athletes. Yeah. So
And so that maps electrical signatures and neural signatures and also stimulates.
So most of these are TDCS devices, meaning that it's a direct current. It goes from an anode to a cathode, in and out of the brain. You can also do transcranial alternating current stimulation, which this cap allows and a lot of these other types of commercial devices allow, which means that the current not just goes in one direction, but it can oscillate. And if you can pick a specific frequency that, say, the neurons in your brain oscillate, you can theoretically improve specific cognitive functions where those natural resonant frequencies exist for specific cognitive functions.
And how long does that effect last?
So again, this is one of those things where we're still investigating how long these effects can last. Some people have seen, at least with TDCS, effects that can last only as short as 30 minutes, and other people have reported effects that last up to 6 months.
Well, I'm going to buy one of those and wear it on the 38 Geary. Just like mix things
But
up.
in the end, though,
You'll be the most normal guy on that bus.
Yeah, I will be.
Yeah, but
Somebody's saying.
People really latch on to these positive findings that you see in the literature. It can't be overemphasized that there's also a lot of data indicating that these things don't work, and that it's hard to replicate these effects, and that there's a huge amount of variability. So, but despite that data to the contrary, people really latched on, and the media definitely latched on to the idea that, wow, you can stimulate the brain and improve this or that or the next thing. So the next question that I have for you, and which many DIYers have, the do-it-yourselfers, the ones that really want to know, how can I do this?
We have made it a long way, Doctor. Holy cow. From 2,000 years ago?
So the question that people want to know is, how much electricity do you need to have these types of effects, to alter your brain function and your subsequent behavior?
So right there, that EEG cap, how much?
Yeah, how much electricity do you think you need to pass into the brain?
All right,
let's go in.
Let's take some questions.
Do you think? Yeah. Just take a answer, and I'll give you.
I feel like it's one of those leading questions, but I would go with the milliwatts.
Milliwatts.
I mean, because it's sort of like a.
Yeah, that's yeah. You're right. Yeah. That's Eureka. I'm going to give you that. Yeah.
Come on, Psycho, lick my battery.
All right.
I had to convert it into watts. I didn't really think about it in watts. But yeah, if you take 9 times... seems about
All right,
I'd
for
have
you,
to actually,
sir.
I haven't converted it properly in my head, but it sounds... Yeah, exactly.
We have your own little, this is so you can determine the magnetic field of the Earth here. It is a compass. Yes, you can totally enjoy. Yeah, that's exactly what you really need. Yeah, get 200,000 of them, sir. All right, give him a round of applause for this guy.
So you can go to the next slide.
So what is this?
So I mean,
9-volt battery.
It apparently is really easy to do this. You know, you just need a 9-volt battery. You can run down to Radio Shack, grab a couple wires, a couple resistors, a couple diodes, some wire, a couple alligator clips to clamp onto a sponge with some sort of a conductive fluid like salt water. For about $20, you can create one of these TDCS devices. And for free, you can go onto YouTube and watch people burn their scalps trying to do it.
Burn their scalps?
Yeah, so if you do it wrong, you can burn yourself.
Okay.
You will never be able to play this game again. That's what I'm hearing.
There's very few really if you do it right and you stay within published safety guidelines, in general, there are few to no real side effects that we know of. Some people complain of headaches. Some people say, headaches is actually the most common. But we don't really know what the cognitive side effects are, and so that's what's being investigated right now. Usually people say, you know what, we believe TDCS works by biasing the resting memory potential, meaning that it's a little bit easier to make those neurons fire, but that's only true under the anode. Under the cathode, where the electricity leaves, it actually makes those neurons a little bit harder to fire. So you can enhance one cognitive function, yet suppress another. So that's why we really focus, at least my research is really focused on TACS, which is really an alternating current, and it's trying to emulate neural oscillations that are involved in a certain task. So remember so many ages ago when I talked a little bit about NeuroRacer, this video game where you're multitasking, and with a little bit of practice you can get better? Well, those older adults that practiced and got better at multitasking also showed neural activity very similar to younger adults after practice. And what that neural activity was a 6 hertz oscillation emanating from this region of the brain, the medial prefrontal cortex. 6 hertz meaning about 6 times per second your brain is pulsating, it's oscillating. And so we thought, well, what happens if you were to pass an electrical current at 6 hertz and try to entrain those neurons and get sort of an improvement in this neural activity that we think underlies multitasking performance. Well, as it turns out, we've only done this once, well, twice, but what we've seen is that instead of a month of cognitive training, over the course of an hour, we can see improvements in multitask performance by just applying 6 hertz stimulation right across the prefrontal cortex.
Wow.
And that's really exciting.
Yeah. Wow. So you're using transcurrent
alternating current stimulation.
And you think that
and
helps
so I
it
think,
pulse at that.
Yeah, and so what we want to do now is test other frequencies to see if it's a general effect or if it's very specific to that frequency, which we believe it is, but we haven't shown this for sure. So we're following up this research with more controls. What if we do other frequencies? What if we do other regions of the brain? And the bigger question is, does it transfer to other cognitive functions? What we saw after cognitive training showed that, well, by improving your ability to multitask, you actually improved sustained attention and working memory. So if we were to apply this stimulation and improve multitask performance, do we also see improvements in sustained attention and working memory? And so this is what we're really doing now, is assessing whether there's a transfer benefit, whether other frequencies give similar responses, whether other regions of the brain can give you the same benefits as what we believe will just be a control. And then, of course, we want to know how long do these effects sustain. We don't know. It could be a day, it could be a month. What we do know is that from the cognitive training, they not only improved after the training, but those gains stayed 6 months later. So now, can we get those similar gains with brain stimulation? That's what we're working on right now.
Epic.
So I had mentioned Halo Neuroscience, for example. They target athletes. These are consumer companies, commercial companies that are, applying stimulation to the motor cortex, regions of the brain that control your body movements. And there's a pretty good amount of literature indicating that TDCS, despite the fact that there's a lot of variability in the results, in general, you can get slight gains in response times. That's almost the most fundamental, easiest thing to find is gains in motor response time.
And just to explain what that is that
so this gentleman here is wearing headphones.
Oh, that's not Beats by Dre?
No, actually.
Oh, I swear to God.
Yeah, it looks pretty sweet, right?
And then they go through the
so,
hair with the electrodes.
Coincidentally enough, the motor cortex, the region of your brain that controls your body movements, just happened to lie right below where you would have your headphones rest. So you can't really see it, but if you look very carefully, there are actually electrodes on the underside of this headset that touch your scalp and will pass a current into your motor cortex in hopes to improve response times. And that's basically what Halo Neuroscience is doing right now with athletes. They're working with the San Francisco Giants currently, the Golden State Warriors. They incorporate that into their training regimen. But the point is, you kind of what I said at the beginning, you have to want to change. You can't just put this on your brain and just reap benefits. The point is, it operates on the networks that are already working. So it just slightly biases. It makes it a little bit easier for your brain to function. But you have to engage your brain to begin with. Otherwise, this type of brain stimulation, whether it's TMS or TACS, TDCS, doesn't really matter. It won't really work unless you're engaging the networks that you're trying to improve.
All right, let's engage again with the next question. Here we go.
So name 3 factors that can affect TES outcomes.
3 factors.
I kind of listed off a few.
Will.
Sponges, huh? Can we get back to sponges?
Get back to sponges.
Any thoughts on some answers? All right, hold on.
Sleep, food, exercise, as well as stress.
Which would basically affect your baseline cognitive function. So yeah, that's one of them. You're right.
Okay.
Yeah, so
partial? All right.
Yeah.
You get your own brain.
Partial, it's a you're, not a
All right,
Eureka,
here we go, guys.
Softball.
Yeah. Yes.
We got it. Oh,
all right, anybody else have an answer? Here.
Conductivity.
Yes, your anatomy. They're all conductors, and based on your anatomy, it's going to determine where the current flows.
All right, anatomy.
If he gets a second, will we give him the full price?
All right, sure.
Yep.
One more.
No pressure.
Environment.
Eureka.
Oh,
Okay.
right, Eureka. Come on
Eureka,
down,
come on
buddy.
up. So I'm going to give that because your environment, it's really more about your cognitive state, what you're doing.
You get
which
a
can be
Eureka
construed as
T-shirt
Your environment.
with a big brain on it. Enjoy it.
All right. So yeah, this is basically emphasizes your anatomy. You have, if you're trying to apply a current into your brain, it has to go through your scalp, your skull, your cerebral spinal fluid, all sorts of different tissues that have different resistivities, and that will cause the electrical currents to flow in different directions. So although people like to think that the current is going directly below where the electrode resides, because you have this cerebral spinal fluid going around your entire brain, remember your brain is suspended in a fluid, which is what enables you to bounce up and down without it slamming into the base of your skull and giving you a concussion. That fluid is also a conductor in its own right, and so these currents can flow in other regions and stimulate other regions of the brain. So based on your anatomy, that can affect the outcome of this stimulation. Yet people still apply stimulation as if everyone is the same. So, intensity is a factor, how strong you apply it. Polarity, whether you put the anode here, the cathode here, where the current goes in and where the current goes out, that will make a difference. Baseline ability, that was partial credit. Basically, your how well you can do a task. If there's a lot of room for improvement, generally you see greater gains than people who have very small room for improvement. Cognitive states, that's kind of like your environment, basically, what you're currently engaged in. That's going to determine whether this works or not. Genetics, which feeds into your baseline ability. Genetics also feeds into neurotransmitter concentrations. So, we all have different amounts of excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters. And so when you're dealing with electrical currents that are stimulating neurotransmitters, or causing these ions to flow around, you are going to end up having different effects just because of the way your chemistry is. So yeah, to keep moving.
All right.
Summarize real quick. What do you think each method of stimulating the brain has in common, which is required to really improve function? Now, I'm not just talking about all the different kinds of neurostimulation, the magnetic stimulation, the electrical stimulation, but it's also true for exercise, and it's also true for brain training. What is really the general underlying
Final
theme
question,
here?
guys.
Delta, changing the baseline state.
Changing the baseline state. Well, that's the outcome. But what do you need?
You say food again?
What do you need?
Just effort in general?
Yeah.
Just any kind of effort?
Effort. That's it. Eureka. Boom.
That's it,
There you go.
Eureka.
Come on up. Yeah.
Here you go, my man. You get your own Eureka T-shirt with a brain.
Yeah, nice.
Wear it with, and put some effort into it. There you go, sir. There it is.
Well played. Yeah. You can just go to the next slide. That's it. You have to want to change. These things won't work without you, right? You have to engage. You have to stimulate your brain, whether it's through exercise, through cognitive training, through neurostimulation. Video games. It's stimulating your brain, but you have to really exercise your brain in some way. You have to stimulate it, and you have to want it to happen. You have to challenge yourself.
Is anyone here going to go out and buy one of these brain stimulation hats? I say a cap or video games? Anyone going to actually try to explore this and improve their cognitive ability? One person. Everyone else will get, okay. We'll get a sponge and a battery and have a great Saturday night.
Yeah.
I think that it's at least going to have a story, even if your brain doesn't work after that.
So that's a pretty good summary point. Do you want to maybe touch one more time on you have to want it to change? Whether you're listening to a lecture or getting stimulated by a game.
Yeah, you really want to keep yourself in that sweet spot, So whether it's video gaming or exercising or applying stimulation, you want to be in that sweet spot where you want to be engaged. You want to be challenged. Not too hard, not too much stimulation. That's not a good thing, but not too little.
So you're telling me I should leave my book club?
I would move the needle towards slightly more challenging,
Won't be the
unless
same without you.
Later, Dan.
Sorry, buddy.
Unless you find them stimulating. But if you say they're stupid and they're really not challenging you to figure out why they're stupid, then maybe.
Well, this has been very stimulating. Let's give it up for Ted.
Thank you.
Let's give it up for Dan.